the LPOR program, or 25% match for the mini grant program. We'll get into what may make up your match in just a moment. There are also competitive grants, very competitive grants. In the fall 2014 grant cycle, GOCO was able to fund about 25% of what was requested. So just keep in mind, we'll talk about this later, but you know, being persistent is really kind of required to receive GOCO funding. In the LPOR grant cycle last go around, I believe we awarded 9 of about 44 LPOR projects. So again, the breakout for funding in the fall 2014 grant cycle is as follows. We received 59 total applications, 44 LPOR grants, 9 mini grants, and 6 plan grants. We awarded about 16 of those. So 50% of those were resubmittals. So again, with persistence, receiving grant writing assistance, and kind of modifying those grant applications over time will help make you successful in the future. So just hang in there if you're not funded this grant cycle, and there's certainly a good likelihood that you can be funded in the future. Just don't lose hope. We received $13.2 million in requests. We awarded about $2.5 million. That's about what we have available this grant cycle. We're working on about a $5 million for this fiscal year, and our fiscal year runs June to June. So this spring cycle will be the last grant cycle of the fiscal year. So just a little recap of the things that we discussed, and we'll just keep on moving. So next we're going to talk about eligibility, eligible project categories, and components. So something to keep in mind as we go through these. If for a component to be eligible, that means that it can count as match, or GOCO funds can go towards it. If a cost is not an eligible project component, then it can neither be funded by GOCO or counted towards your match. So we'll talk about who's eligible for GOCO funds, the types of projects we fund, and then we'll talk about those individual components. So eligible applicants to apply directly to GOCO as an applicant are going to be cities, towns, counties, and parks and recreation districts that receive conservation trust funds from the Department of Local Affairs. If you don't know if you receive those, you can contact DOLA, or they also have a list on their website. I have a pretty updated list if you're not sure if you're from a special district or something. Now, just because you're not an eligible applicant, so you're maybe a school, you're a nonprofit, or you're an unincorporated area in a county, that does not necessarily mean you can't pursue GOCO funds. It just means that you cannot apply directly, and you'll need a project sponsor. That sponsorship can occur in a lot of different ways, but what it means is that eligible applicants, so if you're being sponsored by a city or a county, they must pass a resolution giving you permission to apply, and then if awarded a grant, you'll be required to enter into some sort of intergovernmental agreement, memo of understanding, or the like. That involvement from the sponsoring entity really varies from project to project. We see some projects with schools where maybe the city decides they're going to sponsor the project. They basically just serve as that fiscal agent, and they're pretty hands-off, depending on the school, to manage the project, to manage all grant administration, and everything like that. So the main role for that sponsoring entity is that funds must pass directly through them. We would wire the funds to the eligible entity. They would then cut a check to that partnering organization. So just a list of some types of eligible project categories. One thing of note is environmental ed facilities and restrooms are the only types of indoor recreational facilities that GOCO will fund. We are Great Outdoors Colorado, so obviously we only fund outdoor recreation projects. So here are just some eligible project components. Again, something to keep in mind is this is not an all-inclusive list. There are certainly some things that we could probably fund that are not necessarily on this list, but it does give you some type of idea of the type of projects that we fund. We fund community gardens, functional landscaping. What that means is basically if you need, any kind of revegetation, trees, sod, things like that, we will fund. What we don't fund are things like botanic gardens and kind of more aesthetic types of landscaping. So again, here's a list of some ineligible project components. Again, we do not fund indoor facilities of any kind except for environmental ed facilities and restrooms, non-fixed assets. So if you're doing an artificial turf field, we'll fund the field, but we will not fund the maintenance equipment that may come as part of your contract to purchase from your vendor. We do not do amphitheaters or outdoor performing arts centers, and we also do not offer programmatic funding. Another thing to keep in mind is staff time from either the applicant or the partnering organization is not an eligible form of match. It is a cost that you would otherwise pay, so we do not allow the staff time to count. That being said, equipment time can count, so if you are using your own equipment, that does work. Volunteer time also cannot be quantified and cannot count monetarily towards your match. That doesn't mean that we don't encourage volunteers. As a matter of fact, there's an area in the application that we'll get to a little bit later where you can certainly get points for using volunteers. We definitely encourage it. We just don't allow you to count it as match. So again, just a little summary of what we just discussed, and we'll move on to funding parameters and budgets. So funding parameters, just a nice little chart here of the funding parameters for the LPOR and the mini grant program. So in the LPOR program, the maximum grant amount is $350,000. There is no cap on the total project cost. The minimum overall match is 30%. Of that 30%, a minimum of 10% must be cash. Keep in mind, we will never be more than 70% of the total project cost in the LPOR program. So your total project cost is going to be that grant amount plus your matching funds, and then you're going to take 70% of that, and that is the maximum amount that we can fund. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, kind of what's the sweet spot in matching funds? So, 30% obviously is the minimum. Folks want to know, okay, well, you say 30% is the minimum. What is that? How much should we bring to the table? What I would say is, it is the minimum. I can say as a staff member who reviews every application, I do not penalize someone for only coming in at 30%. However, we definitely want to leverage our funds as much as possible, so if you can bring more to the table, it certainly can't hurt and can definitely make your project more appealing in a competitive grant process. With the mini grant program, the maximum grant amount is $45,000. The kicker with the mini grant program is that your total project cost is capped at $60,000. So if you can fit your project under that $60,000 cap, the mini grant program is much less competitive. We see fewer applications. So if you've got a smaller project, it may be worth looking into other areas where you can save costs and fit under that $60,000 cap to compete in the mini grant program. Minimum match is 25%. Same with the LPOR is a 10% minimum cash match, and in this program we would be no more than 75% of the total project cost. Something of note, we now require from a competitiveness standpoint that 75% of the proposed match must be secured at the time of application. Now, what that does not mean is that does not mean you have to have a 75% match. It just means of your 30% for the LPOR or of your 25% of the mini grant program, 75% of that match that you're bringing to the table must be secured. Secured does not necessarily mean it must be in your bank account, but it must be committed. So if you've got a grant from, say, the Health Foundation, they haven't given you the check, but they've awarded the grant. You can submit that award letter as an attachment to your application to solidify that. If you have donors from the community who can contribute letters that say, we will give X amount of dollars contingent upon a grant award, that is secured funding in our mind. So it does not necessarily have to be in your account, but 75% of the match must be secured at the time of application, or your project will have to be removed from the process. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the budget form. If not, it is on our website. We do require that you use the GOCO budget form. We're going to just kind of run through how to set this form up. So what you're looking at now is going to be your source of funds. This is where you're going to list where all the money is coming from. You're going to list Great Outdoors Colorado, assuming that you are going to be awarded. Obviously, your applicant or partner funds will be listed here as well. You will just make sure that you're listing in the correct column. So as you will see here, the town's funding, who is the applicant, is in the applicant match column and row. And then the generous foundation funding is in the partner column. Anyone that is not the applicant goes in the partner column. just real quick, as you'll see below that is the in-kind section. You will break out in-kind and cash in the source of funds section. Keep in mind also that even though in-kind typically is a discount, it's actually a cost that you are not paying. It is a positive number, not a negative. It does not reduce your project cost, it adds to it. So just keep that in mind as you're listing your in-kind donations. So just some types of in-kind that can count towards your match. You got the list here in front of you, but just a couple of things to talk about. So if you're building a new park on a piece of land that has been donated or purchased within 3 years of the grant decision date, that's going to be June 18th, 2015, then you can actually count that as match. We will need to see an appraisal to verify that as your match, but you can use that as match. If it was donated to you, then it counts as in-kind. If you paid cash for that land, it can then count as your cash match. So definitely, get in touch with us if you have questions about that. Professional services, again, not volunteer time, but if you have a community member who, say, owns a rock yard, they want to donate some boulders to build steps, to build retaining walls, things like that, you can count that value. If they want to, if you have a professional roofer who's going to roof your restrooms for free, that can count as your match. That's not volunteer. They are a professional. It's what they do for a living. You can then use their regular pay rate, even though you're not paying it, to quantify the in-kind donation. Again, to estimate the values of those, pay scale, standard pricing, or rental rates will work. Again, staff time does not count. Material or equipment donations from an applicant or partner do count. So, be sure that you're taking advantage of that if you're going to be using your own equipment. In terms of, again, verifying your equipment, if you're borrowing, say, road and bridge equipment, and they have a typical rate that they would charge another department, you can use that rate. If nothing like that exists, and within your town, you just kind of exchange equipment free of charge, you can examine local rental rates and what you would pay for that piece of equipment to quantify that donation. So you will be asked to provide documentation of the in-kind services that are being committed to the project. If you are awarded a grant and you're requesting payment, you will be required to document that. We do not necessarily require that it's documented at the application stage, but I would encourage it. It just helps reviewers know that that the donation has been secured, and that commitment is not just kind of, you're not pulling it out of thin air, but that it is an actual commitment from someone in your community. So kind of moving on to the use of funds in the on the lower portion of the budget form. We have a sample budget on our website, which is what you're looking at now. We also have our budget template there. The formulas are in the budget template, so I would encourage you to leave those and let the Excel spreadsheet calculate everything for you. The first thing you're going to do as you're laying these out, we ask that you divide the budget into categories. So you'll see here you've got design, demolition, earthwork, utilities, etc. You may not, the number of categories is going to vary depending on your project, depending on how large it is. So we don't necessarily require that you break it into these exact categories, but make sure that they do apply to your project. So once you divide into categories, you're then going to list the contractor or vendor that you intend to use or that you think you might use or that you've consulted with. We do understand that some municipalities cannot go to bid, some municipalities can't even engage outside companies if they are not actually pursuing a project. If that's the case and you don't feel comfortable listing an exact company, you can say, something like to be determined or something like that, just to let us, and then you'll still have to provide the numbers. But if you don't feel comfortable listing the company, that's fine. You can do that. The next thing you're going to do, kind of the second column here, actually asks for a description of the service being provided. As you'll see with the playground equipment, it's just listed as playground equipment. Then you're going to list the number of units. That's going to be the hours, the quantity, whatever it may be for the equipment that you're buying. So you'll see with the demo crew it's 11.4 hours. For the Mile High Youth Court it's 2 weeks. For the playground equipment, because it is one package deal, it's only listed as one. You're then going to list the cost per unit, which then will get you to that total project cost. You're going to associate that cost with either GOCO, the applicant, or the partner. So we do ask that you let us know whose funds are going to what. Now, to make this easier on yourself, I realized before we said that there's a 70-30 split at minimum with GOCO. For the LPOR program, a 75-25 split for the mini grant program. That does not mean you have to do that per expense. So don't rack your brain and drive yourself crazy trying to divide each individual column into 70% to GOCO, 30% to the applicant. You do not have to do that. As a matter of fact, I prefer you don't. It makes my job a little bit easier and makes yours a little easier. So you can associate just one cost. You could attribute the entire playground equipment cost, $100,000 to GOCO, if that's the way that you want to go. Below the cash use of funds is where you're going to list your in-kind services that are being used. So you listed them above in the use of funds. You're now going to bring them down to the in-kind section and show us where they're going so that it adds into the total project cost. Again, as you can see here, they are positive numbers, not negative numbers. So just something to really keep in mind here. Ensure your calculations are correct. So if you're saying that, as you can see with the demo crew, it's 11.4 hours at $100, just make sure that that math is equivalent. Also, make sure that your total source of funds equals your total use of funds. So you can't, for the purposes of a GOCO project, you can't have more money than you actually spend, and you can't spend more money than you actually have. So I know that makes sense, but sometimes we see some mix-ups on the budget form. And then below, at the very bottom of the budget form, we actually have calculations built in to help you calculate that you're meeting the minimum matching requirements. Those formulas are already built in. It will actually say, does it meet the requirement, yes or no. And then it actually says what GOCO's percentage of the total project cost is, so you know where you stand. All right, so that's the budget form and eligible costs. We will move on to the application forms and attachments. So in this section, we're going to talk about the summary form. We're going to talk about a lot of the required attachments, such as the resolution, environmental checklist, and the timeline. So the first thing, once you get through that whole slew of instructions on the application form, you're going to get to the actual application. It's going to start with the summary form. Real quick, one of the questions that we get sometimes, I do realize that on that Word document there is a GOCO watermark. That's fine. If you want to do your own Word document without the watermark, that's okay, but just know that if the watermark is on the application pages when you submit it, that's not a problem. We're not going to throw out the application. Totally fine. So the summary form is pretty self-explanatory, but the top section you will see is about the applicant. Again, the applicant is always going to be that eligible entity. Okay, so that's going to be that municipality, that special district that is sponsoring the application if you're in a sponsorship scenario, and then that partner is going to be that school, that nonprofit, if that's the case. We only require that you list one partner. Typically, the partner is going to be someone that you're actually sharing the project with or is contributing, significant funding to the project. If you've just got a Colorado Health Foundation grant, you don't have to list them as a partner. Typically, this is for municipalities that are partnering, special districts, schools, things like that. Not every person contributing funding to the project is considered a partner, so you don't have to list their contact if they're not really involved in the project. We do ask for a primary contact. One situation that we've run into, especially this last grant cycle, is that folks will list a primary contact, then the primary contact might leave. We send out notification of a grant award or declination to that primary contact, and it's never received. Keep in mind, this primary contact is going to be the person that all communication for the grant is being run through. So make sure that you're thinking about who that's going to be. The primary contact does not necessarily have to be the applicant. So if we're working with one of those scenarios where a school is being sponsored, but the school is really going to manage the project and oversee everything, that primary contact can be with the partnering organization. Just depends on how how you're going to handle that. There should never be two primary contacts. If we have two primary contacts, and that just leaves us with a lot of questions, who should we really contact? You can certainly have that secondary contact, and that would be the second phone call we make if we cannot get a hold of the primary, but that we should only have one primary contact for the project. Below on the About the Project, we ask for a project title. The grant request, this is a LPOR summary form, so it says the grant request cannot exceed $350,000. And then you're going to list that total project cost, which again is your grant amount plus any matching funds. You're going to list the percent of overall match and the percent of cash match. Also, the brief project description, I realize we've shortened that. We've shortened it to about 100 words. So don't sweat that. We're really just looking for some general information about the project. It is not scored. So we're going to learn a lot more about the application once we get into the actual selection criteria questions. Don't feel like that's being scored. I mean, please take it seriously because we do want to be able to get a brief synopsis of the project from that description. Attached to the summary form, you're going to see the application checklist. This lists all of the required attachments. We do ask that you put them in this order. As soon as all of the applications come in, we do a eligibility screening on every single application to ensure that everything's included. It really expedites the process and makes our jobs a lot easier if they are included in this order. So please, please, please include all attachments following the summary form in this order. Also, one thing that I would discourage are cover sheets. A lot of folks like to put pretty pictures on the cover, which then kind of covers up the summary form. We have to flip through a few pages to get into the application. You've got the supplemental attachments that you provide outside of these are not capped. You can submit as many pictures as you like. So you've got plenty of room to include pictures and things like that. So, you know, I would just ask that you avoid putting a cover sheet on the application. So first, the first one that we're going to talk about is going to be the summary form. Just keep in mind also, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead of myself. At the bottom of the summary form, just make sure that you get an authorized signature from the applicant organization. So if you are a school district being sponsored, that signature does need to come from the sponsoring entity. So the governing body resolution, we have a template on our website so you can see what it looks like, and so that you can use if you so choose. If you use our actual resolution form, then that will cover everything that you need. Even if you are awarded a grant, you won't be required to go back to your governing body unless you are just required to by some sort of local policy. And it will have all the language that we need to move forward if a grant is awarded. It must be signed by the governing body of the applicant organization, so city council, town council, county commissioners, board of directors, whoever that might be. The resolution needs to state a few things: support for the proposed project and its completion, the recognition of the need to provide matching funds. You don't necessarily have to quantify that amount unless you want to. The reason I say that is because sometimes between application and when the project is complete, some things change, and if you say $100,000 match and the project comes in under budget, that might not be exactly the case. So really all you need to do is recognize that you will be providing the necessary matching funds. We need you to confirm your maintenance capability. We need you to confirm the status of the property and that the applicant or partner will own the property for at least 25 years. That has actually changed, so I apologize for not updating that slide. We have updated our status of property and our useful life that is included in our grant agreement to state that it's the useful life of the project. So you must own the property or have control of the property or have the property leased for the amount of time that the project will remain in place. We take that from the actual application, and we'll get to that question in a moment. If you don't own the property, you can you can submit some sort of memo of understanding, an IGA that outlines the property ownership or control piece, or any kind of lease agreement, whatever that might look like. You can submit that with the application to attest to the status of the property. The other thing that we require is reasonable public access. I realize that's a bit of a fluffy word because we fund so many different types of projects. We don't want to have just one blanket statement of this is what public access means. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It does not mean you can build a playground for an HOA that is in a gated community that just anyone cannot use. That would preclude it. You cannot fund a playground at a school that is never going to be open to the public and will only be used by students. Now, we do understand there are tons of safety issues that exist with schools and students these days. So in my mind, and an interpretation that we've gone with for some time is that reasonable public access, what that would mean for a school playground is, yes, we understand during the school day when kids are using the property, sure, the gates are locked. You don't want just anyone roaming into the school playing on the playground during school hours. However, after school hours in the summer, when school is closed, winter break, things like that, we do fully expect that anyone from the community can come and play on the playground. Same kind of thing with athletic facilities. We understand that, during sanctioned, sports events, programmed activities, that, not anyone can just come on the field and start kicking a soccer ball. We get that. But outside of those programmed activities, a dad and his kids should be able to go kick a soccer ball, throw a baseball, fly a kite, whatever it is that they want to do. So we do require reasonable public access. And then we ask that you designate a specific person to sign the grant agreement in the instance that a grant is awarded. This really kind of cuts out an additional step at the end. If a grant is awarded, we can then just move straight into generating that grant agreement, send it to you, you can sign it, and send it back to us. Now, what I would ask that you avoid doing is it really, we discovered over time that it's a lot easier to move forward with these grant agreements if you don't name a specific person, so you wouldn't say town manager Jake Houston to sign the grant agreement. In the instance that Jake Houston gets fired or resigns or retires between application and grant award, we would have to have you go back and have someone else have a supplemental letter submitted to allow that current person to then sign the grant agreement. So I think it's a little bit better to use kind of a position. So to say the town manager, the Parks and Rec director, the city administrator, whoever that might be, that way you're going to be filling that position. So then if someone else comes in, they can then still sign that grant agreement. Also, just on that note, if you submit an application to GOCO and in the interim someone changes positions, please let us know. It'll help us avoid a situation that I ran into just a couple of days ago. We did not award a grant. We sent all of the communications to the person that was listed as a primary contact. Turns out that person left, and the town was just still wondering, here we are over a month after grant award, what the status of their grant was. If you don't, we work with about, I think, CML itself has about 250 local government organizations that are involved. We just don't have the ability to keep track of every single position change with those municipalities. So please make sure that you're keeping us in the loop so that we can then do the same for you. So for the environmental checklist, you will notice if you've looked at the new application, we do have a new environmental checklist form. I know it might be a pain for some of those that are resubmitting from last grant cycle, but we have not updated that form in a while. We worked with CPW to come up with a really great inclusive form. You must do a new environmental checklist, even if you're submitting from just the last grant cycle. We need that new form completed. All applicants are responsible for obtaining the necessary licenses, permits, clearances, whatever it may be, to make sure that you're complying with local, state, and federal laws. It must be this version. You must complete our form. It must be signed and included in the application. If the project is located on a developed property, Colorado Parks and Wildlife consultation is probably not necessary. Now, we'll look at the actual form in just a moment, and there are some things that would say that even if it is developed, you may have to do this. If it's located within a certain distance of, say a river, a lake, some sort of body of water, wetlands, you're still going to have to use CPW. And the checklist kind of lays out pretty clearly what those stipulations are. But that being said, if you're doing a school playground that's been in place for 25 years or so, then there's really no need to use CPW. You're pretty sure there's no bald eagle habitats and you're not destroying any wetlands. You can probably have someone on your staff, someone from the city, town, county, complete that checklist if you feel comfortable. But we do need it signed off on, and we need to know that someone has at least taken the consideration to know that they're not destroying any sensitive habitats. Now, if you do have to use CPW, I would get on the phone now and get that scheduled. They book up pretty quickly. They stay busy, but I will say that they do it for free. So instead of paying someone to complete your environmental checklist, you could probably contact your local CPW representative, and they could come out and complete that checklist for you. So here's a little synopsis of the environmental checklist, the new form. It is on our website. It's in the application as well. So as you can see, there are different areas of check boxes. So if something's not applicable, great. Check it, move on to the next one. If there are going to be minor impacts exceeding minor, or more data needed, you will have to then use CPW to complete that. You can also see at the top, the consultation with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, local district wildlife manager, and biological staff is required if the project is expected to have impacts on wildlife, sensitive wildlife habitats, and or lies within 200 feet of any aquatic landscape. So keep that in mind. Also, with the timeline, all grants must be completed within 24 months, and the timeline should be reasonable and correspond to what is presented in the narrative. Here's an example of a timeline. Now, we understand depending on your project, you may not have all of these categories. This is simply just an example. You don't necessarily have to have order benches, land preparation, all those kind of things. But we do want to know that you are going to be able to complete the project within 24 months, and we want to see it kind of laid out as to the time frame that you foresee to complete the project. All right, so we're going to move forward with Part 5, which is the selection criteria narrative. We're going to dive into the individual questions, kind of let you know what it is that we're looking for, give you some helpful tips, some important dates, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So the selection criteria is 13 questions scored on a 100-point scale. Just a little background on the review process. Myself and Madison Brannigan, our new local government program coordinator, will be reviewing all of the applications for the mini, planning, and LPOR programs. We also, some of you may have, I can see some of you on the call, several of you have actually served as GOCO peer reviewers in the past. We basically solicit for peer reviewers. We'll probably start that process here in the next month. We'll be sending out emails looking for folks just like you, Parks and Rec professionals, city, county, administration staff, to help us with the review process. If you've never done it before, it's a great way to learn about the process, to learn kind of what works, what doesn't. You also get a pretty big group of applications to keep as reference. Usually we try to limit the applications to about 8. You've got from about March, let's see, applications are due March 4th. We get them out about a week or so later, and you've got about 30 days or so to read through those and score them. We then, it's usually 3 outside peer reviewers per group. We take the applications, divide them geographically. We take the reviewers, divide them geographically, and then we just play a mix and match game, making sure that there's no overlap between the reviewers and the applications. Keeps the process transparent and helps us really learn a lot from you guys as you interpret the applications, and hopefully you guys learn a little bit from us as we've reviewed these several times in the past. Really helps keep the process transparent. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the selection criteria questions. One thing I would like to preface this with, please keep in mind that these questions, they're not there to trick you. We're not playing games with the application. The applications are pretty straightforward, and we're not looking for any kind of fluff or, again, to kind of trick you into answering incorrectly. If you go through and answer each and every question, and you've got kind of quantitative data, you can provide concrete examples, you're going to do pretty well. The biggest error that we see people make is not answering all the questions, not providing all the information, or just not kind of providing evidence of the statements that they're making. So the first question, describe the community, and keep in mind that these questions are paraphrased. They are not the full question, but just kind of going to paraphrase the question a bit and then give you some ideas of what we're looking for. Again, it's 13 questions scored on a 100-point scale, so they're not all scored on the same point value. Just something to keep in mind. You know, those questions that are worth 15 points, you're probably not going to want those to be one-paragraph answers because hopefully you're dividing your responses into paragraphs because no one really likes to read a whole bunch of words just jumbled together. So describe the community or neighborhood the project will serve. You know, the key here is really, you know, we do want some quantitative information. We ask for some demographics. We do ask for you know, some income information. But outside of that, you know, don't just provide a whole bunch of census data. That's not fun for anyone to read. We really want to know what makes your community unique. You know, you guys live in your communities, work in your communities, work for your communities each and every day, and there's a lot of pride in that. And so let us know what makes your community great. What are the recreational interests? You know, what makes Lamar, Colorado different from maybe some of the other communities out in southeast Colorado on the plains? So really talk about, this is your chance to toot your own horn, to talk about what makes your community great. So use that. You really want to have a reviewer who's never been to your neck of the woods read through this description and feel like they have. They really want to feel that community and get a sense of what your community is about. So really take the time to do more than just provide a bunch of numbers. Really let us know what's great about your community and what makes your community unique. Question 2, describe the scope of the project. What exactly will be built? And then provide the detailed budget. Now, you don't have to provide the detailed budget within this question. That's going to take up a whole lot of pages, and you do only have a 7 to 9 page limit. So that budget will be scored separately as the attachment that you submit. After reviewing this question, reviewers should have no question on what is being built. We want to know sizes, quantities of the various project components. Make sure that you're listing all the project components that are in your budget. One of the first things I do when I get to this question, I read through it, I pull that budget, I set them side by side, and I'm looking to make sure that you're talking about each and every component in the narrative that is listed in the budget. You know, if you're building a picnic area in a town park, you're not just building a picnic area in a town park. You're putting in 2 shade structures that are approximately this size. They're made, you know, they're prefab sheet metal roofs with, you know, with wooden posts. They're, you know, we want to know exactly what it is. You're not just building a trail. You're building a 10-foot wide, crusher-fine, 1,000 linear foot trail. We want to know all of those details. We know each and every detail of the project that you're pursuing. We want to know the useful life. Again, now that we've gone to the useful life requirement for ownership and for the life of the project, we want to know how long is each component going to last. Okay, so please make sure that you are you're letting us know what the useful life is and then how you determined it. Okay, hopefully you're not just taking a shot in the dark. Hopefully you've done your research. You know how long the warranty on the playground is and then how long that useful life is going to be. We're going to use that in your grant agreement to then verify how long your project is required to stay in place. It also helps us determine if it's a wise investment of public dollars. While these aren't tax dollars, they still are Coloradans' lottery proceeds, and we want to know that we're investing them in long-lasting projects. We want to know if you had any consultations with other communities or outside experts to know, you know, if you've never done a splash pad, hopefully you're reaching out to some other folks to figure out what it is, you know, what types of considerations you need to consider to know that this project is going to be viable in your community. If you don't know someone to contact about a particular type of project, let us know. That is information that we can provide you with. If you've never done a, if you don't have an artificial turf field in your community and you're pursuing one, give me a call. We funded plenty of them. I can put you in contact with some folks that can give you some information on who you might use, and again, those types of considerations that you need to have. Why did you choose particular vendors or materials? You know, again, just using the turf field example. You know, why did you choose to go with with artificial turf as opposed to natural grass. Let us know those kind of things and why you're choosing the components that you are. If applicable, describe the existing state of the facilities. So if you're replacing a playground, we want to know what are the shortcomings of the current equipment. What's wrong with it? Why are you replacing it? All that information helps us determine if this is a responsible replacement of the project that you're proposing. And then remember, answers should reflect what is presented in the budget. So, one of the things I'm going to look at, if you say you're going to buy 5 picnic tables, I'm going to look directly at the budget and make sure you've got 5 picnic tables in there. So make sure that your budget agrees with the scope question in the narrative. One other thing, this is a great area to reference photos of the existing site. We now ask that you submit photos of the existing site even if there's not equipment there currently. Even if you're building a new park, it really helps. Pictures worth 1,000 words, so it does help to understand what currently exists in the location and kind of what the topography is, what the area looks like. That being said, photos should never substitute for the narrative. So just because you're showing us a picture of the existing playground doesn't mean you don't have to describe what's wrong with it. So please make sure that you're covering all of that in the narrative. Number 3, who are the existing and or expected users of the proposed project? Basically this question is all about demand. Who's asking for this project? Who's it going to serve? General vague answers really don't help that much. So really try to avoid, statements like the entire town is going to use this new, this new town park. Really think about, what ages does the playground serve? Who's going to be playing ball on your new field? Talk specifically about those leagues, teams, recreational users, all those kind of things. Be as specific as possible so that we can really kind of quantify that demand and say, wow, this is really going to make a difference in this community. We ask that you estimate the user numbers and how the improvements will impact those numbers. So hopefully they're going to impact those numbers for the better. And one of the things I would say here is that, this is not, we don't score strictly based on the number of users. So we fund projects in Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs. We fund projects in Swink, Nucla, Lamar, tons of smaller rural communities. So it's not just based on the sheer number. We're really kind of looking at it in comparison to the size of the community. So don't let that number scare you, and don't think, well, we're only a town of 400 and this is only going to serve 100 people. That's a fourth of the population. That's a big deal. Also, I would say one of the best ways to really botch this question is to not provide an estimate. We understand you may or may not have exact user numbers. We're looking for you to ballpark it so we've got an idea of the impact that it's going to make. So please make sure that you are providing some estimate. Whether you've got to use trail counters, whether you've got to send an intern out there with a clicker to count, whether you charge your parks maintenance staff to just kind of get some anecdotal numbers on random days that they're out trimming trees or picking up trash. We need some sort of estimate in this question, and if you don't provide an estimate, it's a great way to lose points. Number 4, describe access to the proposed project. How is it accessible to users, and by what means? So is it accessible by trails, sidewalks? Just let us know how folks are getting there. Let us know if access is an issue. We fund a lot of projects. We funded a project this last go-around in Palmer Lake where the biggest piece of it was a pedestrian bridge to get folks over the railroad. Currently, folks are really having a hard time getting to the park, so it was underused. So just make sure you're letting us know if you're addressing access as part of the project. Talk about, yes, access is an issue, but here's what we're doing to fix that. And include detailed maps of the project area. Also, we do ask about ADA accessibility now. This is something that you are all aware of. It's being pushed on you and required of you now. So we need you to talk about, how are you addressing ADA access? Is it part of the project? Is it already ADA accessible, so it's maybe not part of this project, but folks with disabilities can get to it? So just let us know where you stand on this project with ADA accessibility. Number 5, we're talking about the recreational needs that the project will serve. As you can see, it's a 15-point question. This is a big one. So we want to know how the project is going to enhance recreation for the community. What type of programming, environmental education will the project provide, if any? And we need to know what folks are doing for lack of the project. Okay, so you know, if there are no adequate ball fields in your community, where are the teams having to travel to? Are you losing revenue because of it? What are the inconveniences or hazards with folks trying to travel? Or maybe simply folks just aren't playing baseball in your community because they don't have a field. Or they're forgoing environmental education opportunities because you don't have this outdoor classroom. So be as specific as you can. We're looking for concrete examples here. You know, again, blanket statements, vague, general statements really don't do much for you here. We really want to know some specifics on the inconveniences or hazards that exist for lack of the project. Number 6, so there are kind of 2 parts. As you will notice, one of the new requirements is that we do require that some form of public process has taken place prior to application. If it has not, the application will not be considered for funding. The reason we went that direction, guys, is because without match secured and without a public process having taken place, projects just aren't competing, and it's really just, you know, it's wasting our applicants' time, it's wasting our staff time and reviewer time to review them, and they're 2 huge pieces of this and of our funding that we consider. And so we do require, 1, that some form of public process has taken place. So some public meetings, some surveys, something to gauge public interest in the project must have taken place for you to be eligible to apply. Now, that's one piece that kind of confirms your eligibility. The second piece is the actual question where you're going to discuss the process that you've undergone, and that's going to be scored. So, you know, if you just kind of threw together some survey just to be eligible to apply, but you can't, you know, but it doesn't seem like a very wide-reaching process, and you can't quantify those results and let us know what you learned, just because it makes you eligible to apply doesn't necessarily mean you're going to score well on this question. So just something to keep in mind as we're approaching that deadline. If there's anything else you can do to beat this up, I would encourage you to. So 1, we want to know whether it's part of some sort of planning document, a master plan, a site plan, something like that, and the public process that took place to form it, or we want to know if it was a separate public process. And what I would say is neither of those is necessarily better than the other. As a matter of fact, I think these more cause-driven public processes tend to sometimes score a bit better because it really shows that the project is arising from a real community need, and folks have been vocal about this is why you need the project that you're pursuing. So even if it was part of a planning document, it might be worth considering revisiting with the public again just to gauge that interest and help it form your project. We need to know that the public had ample opportunity to participate. We want you to detail the meetings and provide a synopsis, you know, letting us know kind of what took place at the meetings. And then we want to know, you know, did you conduct a survey? And if you did, we wanted you to summarize those results. You'll see that we asked for a blank survey. The reason behind that is, you know, we're not going to take 100 surveys if you submit them as attachments and make sure that your, you know, that your percentages were correct. It just bogs down the application, and with the bulk of the applications that we as staff and our reviewers have, it's just not realistic to think that we can get through all of the completed surveys. But we do want to see a blank survey so that we can see the types of questions that were asked and make sure that you're asking relevant questions to determine if it's going to be a viable project and a needed, demanded project in the community. And then we ask that the key to this, guys, is a lot of folks really get excited about telling us the process that they conducted, and they forget to tell us what they learned. So please, you know, if the process takes place in a vacuum, what good did it really do? So let us know, you know, through this public process, we learned that instead of, you know, instead of picnic pavilions, that the community would like to keep it natural and use shade trees, so we're going that direction. Or that you learned that the kids really want a climbing wall as opposed to a traditional play structure. So let us know, again, what you learned and how the project helped form the project. So based on that public process, we then want to know if you received any opposition to the project. two things about this question. One, opposition in and of itself does not necessarily mean that you're going to lose points here. As a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of reviewers that really appreciate when someone's willing to acknowledge that there is opposition. As many of you guys know, as much as we all try to make everyone happy, it's just not possible. So we understand, there are going to be some folks that may not agree with your project. That's okay. Let us know about it. Hopefully, through that opposition, you're trying to modify that project so that you can find some common ground and try to at least appease those concerns. Again, another piece of this is that judging from the public process that was conducted, it definitely bleeds over into the opposition question. What I would say for myself personally as a reviewer is that if I read through a public process and it wasn't a very good one, it didn't give a whole lot of folks an opportunity to comment, and then you get to question number 7 and there was no process and you say, or no opposition, and you say that, it really raises questions for me, like how do you really know that if you didn't really give the community a whole lot of opportunity to comment? So keep that in mind. Question number 8. When will the project be ready for construction? So
you can phone in,
We basically we basically did away with the shovel readiness question, but that's kind of what we're getting at. We want to know where you're at in the process. We want you to provide evidence that the project will be completed within 2 years. We want you to describe design and engineering done to date, where you're at, how long it's going to take to do if you're not done. And then we want you to list any permits, clearances, anything that you're going to need to acquire before you can actually build the project. We want to know how shovel ready this project is and how long it's going to take to secure any of those documents that may be outstanding. Question number 9, estimate the annual cost to maintain the project. You have to provide an estimate on this question. Just no way around it. If you don't provide an estimate of how much it's going to maintain, we can't really determine if it's going to be a long-term sustainable project. You must provide an estimate. Just like with the user numbers, we need an estimate here. Also, a breakdown really helps as well. If you're doing a large-scale park renovation, we want to see what are those duties that you're considering that make up that total project cost or that total estimate for maintenance. We don't just want to see one blanket statement of it's going to cost us $10,000 a year to maintain it. Well, what is that going to go to? Who's going to be responsible for it, especially in these partnership scenarios? If you're doing a school playground, who's going to maintain that playground? Is it going to be the municipality? Is it going to be the school? Let us know that. And then let us know how maintenance is funded. So where's that money coming from? Also, one of the things that I think really helps me is if you can list what your maintenance budget currently is, especially if there's going to be an increase. Sometimes it may be that you've got an outdated piece of equipment that is actually costing you more to maintain than a new one would, especially with advances in technology. Definitely let us know that. Something that we look favorably upon if you're going to be able to lower those costs. But let us know what that budget is so we can determine if this is a feasible project. Question number 10, will a CYCA accredited youth corps or other local youth organization be involved in the project? As stewards of the outdoors, and it's hoping to, a goal of ours is to help, as is I'm sure yours, is to help kind of mold those future stewards of the outdoors. And so as part of that, we really want to see youth involved with our projects in one way or another. It's important that you try and get youth involved. It could be anything from planning, fundraising, or implementation. The reason we say that is, for instance, skate park projects. We understand those are highly technical, and I'm speaking about concrete skate parks here, highly technical work that needs to be done by professionals. We get that. You're not going to have kids out there pouring concrete, hard hats on, jackhammering, things like that. That's understandable. But those skaters should be involved in planning and fundraising in some way as part of the project. These kids should be a part of it. So please make sure you're incorporating youth in the project in one way or another. Could be a local youth group or a CYCA youth corps. I got to be honest, just from my perspective, it doesn't matter to me. As a matter of fact, I think in some communities it's almost better to see those local youth get involved, take some ownership and some community buy-in into the project. I'm not going to score you down because you use the local, local 4-H group, local Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, FFA, whoever it may be. If you can use those groups, great, do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a youth corps. But that being said, GOCO funds can go towards the youth corps as well. We realize they don't do their work for free. You do have to pay for it, and it is an eligible cost. So if you need to budget a little extra money in there for GOCO funds to help you hire a youth corps, do that. Number 11, how much of your planned cash match is secured? Obviously now we require that the answer be at least 75% of the planned cash match. So please just make sure that 75% of your match is secured. If the entire match is not secured, what is your plan B? What are you going to do to raise those funds, the additional funds, if 100% is not completely secured? Talk about partnerships. Key to this as well is if you don't have partnerships, sorry, if you don't have partnerships, tell us why. We understand in some communities it's really tough to get partnerships, to get local businesses to get involved in a project. If that's the case, let us know who you've approached. Show us that you've at least put in some effort, and we still may look favorably upon that, because again, there are a lot of different economic conditions across the state, and we don't want to penalize someone for really trying hard to seek out partnerships, and it just didn't work out. So as important it is to discuss those partnerships, it's also important to discuss the lack of if that's the case. But you know what you want to do here is all those partnerships that are listed on the budget, make sure you're talking about them. We love to see leveraging and partnerships established in the community, so please make sure that you're describing those in the narrative of the application. Also here, as I mentioned before, volunteers cannot count monetarily, but you can get points here. So talk about the inclusion of volunteers in the project, and you can certainly get awarded points. Again, the drop-off from a project being funded to not being funded the last go-around was about a half point. So every point counts, and if you can incorporate volunteers, do it. That extra point may be the difference between getting funded and not. Now, question number 12, what is compelling about your community's need for GOCO funds? You know, what's unique about the need for funds for your project? What's unique about your community's need for funds? You know, everyone's kind of took a hit in the economic downturn, and we see that a lot. Doesn't really do a whole lot when you read it, you know, 45, 50 times per grant cycle. So if there's some unique scenario situation of why you need to leverage your funds now, or why your community may be in more dire straits than another, talk about that. Make it really connect, again, like the community description, to your community. You know, as I mentioned, will a significant amount of matching funds be lost if the project's not awarded, or, you know, are funds going to go, you know, are your funds going to be lost if not awarded? And number 13, guys, we do ask that you provide up to 7 letters or emails of support. Keep in mind this question does not require narrative, and we really encourage user letters. Now, something about this question to keep in mind is that we get a lot of questions about, I know I mentioned earlier, if you've got someone, a partner letter, someone's contributing funds to the project, someone like that, those are considered separate from these non-cash letters of support that you're going to include in the application. So you're capped on non-cash letters at 7. However, partner letters are not capped, and they don't count against your 7-letter max. So something to keep in mind. But again, you know, a lot of times we see letters from county commissioners, from the mayor, things like that. Those are all well and fine, but that resolution and the fact that you're even permitted to apply, let us know that you've got their support. So we really want to see letters from those groups that this project is actually going to touch, and those users that are really demanding it. Really, again, just goes even further to document that community support and buy-in for the project. All right, guys, that is all 13 questions of the selection criteria. Again, pretty straightforward. We're not trying to trick you. If you answer each and every question, you provide solid data, you're going to have a really good shot at getting funded. So just some helpful tips. If you have not already, I would assume that all of you are planning to apply. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have called in to listen to me for an hour. So if you have not spoken with myself or Madison about your project already, please make sure that you're giving us a call to talk through that project. We want to make sure it's going to be eligible, and most of all, it's going to be competitive. This is a competitive grant process, and we want to make sure that you're set up for success on the front end and that you're bringing a viable competitive project into the grant cycle. Submit a draft application for pre-review. The deadline for those is going to be February 18th. We usually set that date 2 weeks before the application deadline so that we can guarantee that we're going to be able to get it back to you. If you can send that over to us, send it electronically, send it as a Word document. We'll use the review function. We'll get some eyes on it, and we can call out those areas where you would have lost points if you just submitted, and we can give you some suggestions on how to improve the application before it's scored. You know, again, make sure you're applying to the right grant program. If you've got a $70,000 project and you're requesting $45,000 and you submit to the mini grant program, we're going to have to tell you that's not going to work, and you'll have to shift over to the LPOR program. So make sure you're applying to that right program based on your project cost. Refer to the applicant reference sheet, which is on our website. Remember, the process is very competitive, as I said earlier, and you know, sometimes we can provide a lot of feedback on the back end of an unsuccessful application attempt. So don't lose hope. We're here to help. We can provide score sheets. We can provide summaries of the score and let you know. We can set up time to talk and let you know where you fell short so that you can improve it and come back. Again, that's not to say that you can't be successful the first time. We just want to kind of set those expectations and say, you know, we're funded 25% of the project. So that means 75% aren't going to get funded. But we're here to help, and we can help make you successful in the future. And then, you know, just reapply if not successful, and we can definitely help you coordinate that. Here's just a brief little thing. Sometimes for me, I know it helps. Sometimes it helps to know more of what not to do than what to do. Don't apply without contacting staff. Don't respond not applicable to any selection criteria question. Best way to lose points in this application process is to not answer a question. So please don't do that. We put a lot of thought into that application, and all the applications that we ask are applicable, so please don't tell us otherwise. Don't only reference an attachment to answer a question. So you know, when we ask for feedback in the process question, summarize that feedback in the narrative. Don't just you know, don't just reference an attachment that summarizes those results. We want to know that application, that information in the actual narrative. Try not to, try to avoid those generalized, vague statements. Don't have letters of support sent directly to the GOCO office. We just don't have the capacity to, make copies and insert letters of support into applications. All of your letters of support must be included in the application upon submittal. Don't list 2 people as a primary contact. Do not exceed the page limit. I mentioned before we do that eligibility screening. What I will say is, we're not like maybe some funders who, if you didn't include something, we throw out your application. We're going to give you a chance to revise it and fix it. But same goes with if you exceed the page limit. If I get an application that's 9.5, 10 pages, I'm gonna get back in touch with you and tell you, hey, I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to shorten this and submit it by this deadline. We usually give about a week or so to get revised materials in, so you're gonna have to go back in and find some areas to cut it down. Another good reason to submit a draft, if you're having trouble hitting that page limit, you can submit a draft. We can typically find some areas where you might be able to shorten it. And then you may not submit an unsigned resolution. This resolution must be signed and approved upon submittal of the grant application. Oops. Here's some important dates. Those applications are available on our website. Applications are due March 4th. Recommendations are made May 14th. And decisions are made June 18th. Just in terms of when you would be notified, typically about a week out from that committee meeting on the recommendation date of May 14th, we will then be sending out a list of the recommended projects. So you'll have a pretty good idea, I would say, in early May if your project is going to move forward in the process. All right, guys, that is it for the GOCO Local Government Grant Writing Webinar. Our contact information is below. I'm Jake Houston, Local Government Program Manager. Madison Brannigan is our new Program Coordinator. Our phone numbers are there, as well as our emails. Please don't hesitate to give us a call. Just so you know, Jackie and Madison are going to stay online on the chat function to answer any additional questions that you all might have, and they'll stay on there as long as you need them. Otherwise, don't hesitate to give myself or Madison a call, shoot us an email, let us know if we can help you in any way. And that is it. That's it for me. Again, they will be on online answering questions. Give us a call if you have any questions for us, and good luck this grant cycle. Thanks a lot.